Good afternoon. My name is Beatriz. I am a PhD student at University of Brasilia, and I will present the conduction of the sections. Each presenter will have 15 minutes to present their paper, and then we will have 5 minutes of discussions. The first presentation is intituled the Network of Her Effects Depending on Previous Work Experience in the US, a propensity score analysis using magical migration dates, from Professor André Luís Rossi de Oliveira. Professor André, the word is with you.
All right, thank you. Let me first share my screen. Here we go. All right. Can you see the slides?
Yes.
Okay, so first of all, I'm very happy to be here and participating in this workshop in honor of JOANILIO. He was a professor of mine back in the 80s, 1985, 1986 or something. I wasn't able to go to the opening ceremony yesterday, but I'll try to be there for the closing ceremony, at least get to see him and talk to him a little bit. He's probably at the other session, which is, of course, much better. Jacques is talking there, so he's much more interesting than my talk, most likely. So this paper is about network and herd effects. We're trying to do a test of the theory behind these two effects using a propensity score analysis. So the outline for the talk is I'm first going to just discuss the motivation, explain a little bit about the data, and talk about the matching technique that we used, go over the findings, and offer some concluding remarks. So the motivation is that, first of all, location decisions are affected by the pattern of migration in general, but more specifically by the location of ethnic enclaves. So migrants tend to go to locations where these ethnic enclaves exist. For instance, in the US, there are large Mexican-born populations in the southern part of the US, close to the border, and also enclaves in major international gateways. And the literature says that this is consistent with the idea of relocation cost minimization, meaning that migrants, they tend to go to places that are closer to where they live if they can to minimize relocation costs. That can't be all the explanation. There are other parts to this explanation. A couple of effects that have been discussed in literature are the so-called network effects and herd effects. Network effects have to do with the existence of these ethnic networks inside these ethnic enclaves. So when people relocate or live close to one or inside one of these enclaves, they tend to have access to job search and public benefits assistance, shelter, ethnic goods, psychological support, and a few other benefits. And these benefits tend to grow over time as the size of the enclave grows. So these network effects grow as well. But eventually they will be exhausted. It's like an inverted U-shaped curve. The benefits grow up to a certain point, they reach a maximum, then they start decreasing. Mostly because after a certain point, there is going to be a lot of competition for jobs in that area, and that kind of counterbalances the benefits of being close to the enclave. There are also the herd effects, and these have to do with the information that migrants use when they make decisions about where to migrate, where to relocate. Typically, you expect that migrants who are migrating for the first time, they are going to be looking at the decisions made by fellow migrants who have migrated earlier and discount their own information in favor of the information that they get from these other migrants, especially if these other migrants live in the same region as them. So it might happen that a migrant might choose to go to one of these places where there are large ethnic enclaves, even if that enclave has grown past its optimum threshold. So we can think of the difference between network and and herd effects as follows. So network effects have to do with the stock of ethnic migrants, whereas herd effects have to do with the flow of migrants, the recent flow of migrants to a given location. All right, so what we're trying to do here is test the theory behind these network and herd effects. Actually, we're mostly interested in the herd effects, even though we also test for network effects. And the idea is that whether or not a migrant has worked in the US before should have an impact on these effects. For instance, if a migrant has worked in the US before and came back to Mexico and is going again into the US, might have superior information about the net benefits of these ethnic enclaves. Maybe he or she has lived inside one of these enclaves, knows how they can benefit from everything that these enclaves offer. On the other hand, they might place more weight on their own experience rather than the experience of other migrants, because again, they've already lived in the US or wherever they went to, and they've gathered more information about the value of enclaves and other things that have to do with their experience in the new country. So our data comes from this survey called Encuesta sobre Migración en la Frontera Norte de México. We're calling it EMIF Norte. And it's been conducted since 1992 by the Mexican government together with this higher ed institution called El Colegio de la Frontera Norte. It's got data on Mexican nationals who are moving from Mexico to the US, as well as those who are moving from the interior of Mexico to the northern border of the country. We are going to focus on those who are moving to the US. So the migrant is asked a lot of questions about social demographic characteristics, motivation for migrating, health, destination, etc. The sample comes from, our particular sample comes from a survey that only contains information on Mexican nationals 15 years of age and older, and they were interviewed at border towns in Mexico, declared that they had the intention of crossing into the US. So we kind of filter out everybody else who's in that survey. The findings that I'm going to present you come from data from 3 years only, but I've already added more years, and I'm working on re-estimating these effects. Hopefully, I'll have those results soon. We could have used from 2009 to 2011 as well, but we didn't want to capture the effects of the 2008 financial crisis. We had to create a few new variables from the data. The first one is called the network effect variable. That actually uses data from the American Community Survey. So it's just a percentage of a state population in the US that is of Mexican descent. As for the herd effect variable, we created it as follows. So first, we take a given migrant, let's call him migrant I. We look at everyone who migrated to the US and came from the same state in Mexico as that migrant. That's going to go in the denominator. And then amongst those who share that same origin state, we look at those, or we find those, we count those who migrated to the same destination as migrant I. That's going to go in the numerator. That's going to give us an idea of the impact of those who have migrated to the same location as migrant I and come from the same origin state. And then we create a dummy variable for previous US work experience. Let's take a quick look at some of the descriptive statistics. Here we split the sample into two parts. We have those with no previous US work experience. That's going to be our control group. And those with previous US experience are going to be our treatment group. As you can see here, when you compare the network variable, or the average of the network variable between those two groups, it's significantly higher for those who have worked in the US before. But when you compare the averages of the herd effect variable, they're pretty much the same. Of course, we can't make any conclusions just by looking at this data, because the two groups, the treatment and the control group, could be very different in other dimensions, in other respects, in other covariates, I mean. So what we're going to do is we're going to apply a matching method to the data to kind of homogenize the two groups in terms of these other covariates. So we start with some t-tests, and they reject, for all the variables, they reject the null that the difference in the averages of those covariates is equal to 0, meaning that the two groups have statistically significant different averages, which tells us that we need to adjust the treatment and control groups for these differences. And we're going to do that using matching. Matching can be done many different ways. Here we use propensity score matching. I'm not going to get into the theory behind this. I don't have time for that. But typically you don't know the propensity score, which is the probability of treatment, and it needs to be estimated. So we estimated that using a logit model. And then we plug the propensity scores into a distance measure or metric, and we use the so-called nearest neighbor method, which basically takes a treated unit and then tries to match it to a control unit that is closest to it in terms of this distance metric. So how well did our matching procedure work? First, let's take a look at the standardized mean difference. This is before matching. So if you look at the distance variable, which is the distance between the state of origin of the Mexican migrant and the destination state in the US, we can see that it's very high. It's around 0.77 standard deviations. And for most of the variables, that is true, that the standardized difference was quite high before matching, sorry. Then after matching, what do we get? We can see that it improved quite a bit. If you look at the distance variable, for instance, the standardized mean difference dropped from 0.77 to 0.15. Most of the other variables, it worked well for most of the other variables. For documented, it also worked, but the drop in standardized mean difference wasn't that large. It went from 0.15 to 0.10 for 3. Another way to look at how effective the matching method was is to compare the distribution of propensity scores before and after matching. So the two here on the left, the two graphs here on the left show the distribution for the treated and the control group before matching. You can see that the distributions are very different. After matching, they're quite similar. So it's another indication that our matching procedure was successful. Then we run a regression on the matched data set. And we are particularly interested, of course, on the coefficient of previous US work experience. This is for the network effect. So that coefficient is positive and statistically significant. So having worked in the US before increases the network effect. I'll give a more in detail interpretation later. And lots of the other variables that we include in our model are also statistically significant. As for the herd effect, the coefficient looks large, right, 0.2760, but it's not statistically significant, which means that having worked in the US before seems to not have any herd effects. All right, so that's one way to do it. There are many other methods that we could have used, and I'm working on applying those as well. A second one that I have used is called the augmented inverse propensity weighing score. Again, I don't have time to get into the formula. I just want to point out one thing. This estimator requires two pieces. The first one are the estimations of the means of the dependent variable for the treatment group and the control group. These are the mu hats. And it also requires an estimate of the propensity score. I mentioned before that we used logit for that. Now, these estimates could be off, right? I mean, there's no guarantee that we're getting good estimates of these things. So one of the advantages of the AIPW is that it's doubly robust, which means that it only requires one of the types of estimates to be good for the entire estimator to have good properties like efficiency, etc. All right, so what are our findings when we applied this, when we used this estimator? As you can see here, the mean of the network effect was 0.0158, which is very close to what we got from the regression. So this is reassuring. We used bootstrapping to calculate these statistics. You can see that the minimum is 0.009, the maximum is 0.022. So this confidence interval does not include 0, which means that the estimate is statistically significant. What is the interpretation? So this coefficient is close to 1.6%, right? It means that migrant with previous work experience in the US will move to a state where the Mexican population is on average 1.6 percentage points higher than that of states favored by migrants with no previous US work experience. So there is a significant network effect. When we use the AIPW estimator to find the herd effects, again, we got the same result as the one we had with the regression. The mean looks high, right, 0.28, but when you do the bootstrapping, the confidence interval goes from negative 0.74 to 1.13, so it includes 0, which means that the coefficient is not statistically significant. So let me just offer a few concluding remarks. Hopefully I'm doing okay on time. So we concluded that previous US work experience does have a significant impact on how network effects enter the migrant's location decision. And why is that? So the idea here is that, I think I mentioned this before, if a migrant has worked in the US before, has a better sense of the benefits of these ethnic networks, okay? So might place more value on the ethnic goods that they provide and are willing to go back to those ethnic enclaves after they've come back to Mexico. They also might have better information about the size, so maybe they know that the ethnic enclave is still providing more benefits than creating problems or creating job competition, so they're willing to go back there. Whereas migrants with no previous experience might hesitate to go to states with large Mexican community because they know that there's going to be a lot of competition for jobs. As for herd effects, we found no evidence that previous work experience would affect that, which is evidence. Granted, it's not, definitive evidence, and I'm still working on other tests, but it's evidence against the theory of herd effects, because you would expect that migrants with no previous experience could be more susceptible to herd behavior, but that's not borne out by the data. All right, I think that's it. Hopefully, I'm still within the time that was allotted to me. Thank you very much, and let me open it up for questions.
Thank you, Professor André. Now we have 5 minutes to discuss.
Yeah, Emilson has seen this work before, so
No,
maybe he has some questions.
Yeah, it's very interesting. For me, the surprising, the network effects, I think makes perfect sense, in terms of the previous experience and all that. But the herd effects, I'm surprised to see that you could not find any evidence. Now, it makes sense that previous work experience should not affect that at all, I think. But then I wonder if it is a question of the type of procedure that you use in terms of identifying the herd effects being too broad, in the sense that you are considering, say, like a state, right, from a particular state in Mexico. So perhaps, if you were able to go towards like a city component, that you may be able to find stronger results. I'm basing this on my not knowledge, but then it's just like what I think it happens with Brazilians that go to the US. So I think that there is a herd effect for example, for individuals that go from a Governador Valadares to a particular region in the US, because that, that has been noticed that, there is a concentration of, I think it's in, it's not New York, it's the other state, that you have a large concentration of Brazilians from Governador Valadares going there. In fact, then even the illegal passage, through Mexico, it seems like there is a connection there. So I just wonder if it would be possible for you to get information at the city level instead of the state.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. It is possible. I started with state because coding reasons, it was a lot easier to work with states. And also there is a question about the sample size. So as I add more years, I will have more observations within each city, and then I can use that to kind of drill down to the city level instead of the state level. Yeah, so that's perfectly possible. I mean, it could be that I do find herd effects once I do that, and I'm planning to do that in the near future. So thank you for your suggestion. It's really helpful.
And the other question is that I have is that is it possible to replicate this using Brazilian data, like for the Brazilian community?
I'm not aware of data that is as rich as what we have for Mexican migrants. I haven't looked, to be honest. I kind of stopped working with migration for a while, but now I'm planning to go back to this. So it's certainly something that I can look into in the future.
I have a little question. Sorry if I'm wrong, but your migration model, your kind of migration model, does not meet with Lewis 1954 theory. They for developed countries, I think that it is reasonable to think that migration will complete all the work first. But for uneven economies, I don't think so that it is this. We will have the same result. It is only a comment, but I should would like to see your paper in an uneven economy. How the migration will behave in an uneven economy.
What do you mean? What do you mean by an even economy?
Undeveloped economies like Brazil, Ecuador, but not the migration to US, but the migration to these countries like Venezuela to Brazil or Ecuador to Brazil. How the migration will behave in this kind of situations.
Yeah, I think that would be very, very different, right? Because one of the main motives that Mexicans and others, like from Central America, move to the US is for economic reasons, right? They want a better life. I mean, in the recent past, you've seen a lot of people applying for refugee status. So, I mean, you could question whether they're actual refugees or if they really are just trying to like game the system. But anyways, I think that migration from Venezuela to Brazil, for instance, has a lot to do with the political crisis in Venezuela, right? So they're just desperate people who didn't have even enough time to think about their decisions. So I think that the model there would be different, as you mentioned before. But to kind of test that model empirically, we would need to find the data, as Emilson mentioned earlier, and I'm not sure that we have that data.
Okay, thank you. It's a very
Yeah.
very interesting paper. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you for your question. There's still a lot of work to be done, though.
Yes.
Something that I like to ask is that one of the counter-stilizate facts is that to migrate, you have to have higher salaries to compensate for the migrations. So for me, it is a surprise that the experience does not affect, because when you have more experience, you have higher salaries. So how do you justify this?
Well, so the model controls for wages, right? One of the covariates in the regression analysis, for instance, is wages. So what we're talking about is the what is the word I'm looking for? The independent effect of having worked in the US before on network and herd variables after you have already controlled for wages. So it is there in the model, and it has to be because, like you said, the money factor, if you will, is one of the main reasons why people migrate.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Professor André.
Thank you.
And now, if no one had no other questions, I will pass to Professor Emilson presentations, whose the title is Prestigial Clubs. Now, Professor Emilson, you have the word.
Thank you. Thank you, Bia.
Are you?
Yeah, if you. Okay, so so this work, if you go to the first, yeah. So this work is co-authored paper with Richard Corns. And Richard is deceased, unfortunately. So then he passed away in 2015. And we wrote this paper much earlier. I presented this paper in a conference in 2013 in Foz do Iguaçu, Ampec. And it was a conference that I met JOANILIO at that conference. So then I thought that this paper would be appropriate for this particular event, since we are here, and celebrate JOANILIO. And it just happened that, in 2017, when I met him, it had been past a few years since I had seen him last. And that was a significant event because after that, then we saw each other quite a bit. So I participated in some of the conferences that he organized, including one in the US. And so I'm very happy to be here. Joanilio was my professor at the University of Brasilia, and he was a tremendous influence in my career. It was due to him that I went to the US to get my PhD at the University of Illinois in the 1980s. And I owe a great deal to him for providing me with the stimulus. In fact, I really enjoyed his classes because it was essentially the first class in economics at the University of Brasilia that I could see some mathematical models put to good purpose and try to understand, economic growth and other things. So, let me now talk about prestige clubs. So the motivation for this is that there are a number of organizations that essentially use prestige in order to attract individuals to contribute to particular causes. So charities, orchestras, and even universities, religious organizations, they provide individuals with some sort of a prestige, like they can do advertising, their contributions, they can place their members according to different categories, for example, like gold members according to their contributions, or versus like silver members. And so there are a lot of examples that one can look at for prestige to be used in many different ways, right? So as to motivate individuals even for different categories in different contributions. Now, why do we use club theory? We use club theory because the amount of prestige that you get from a given category, there is some crowding out effect. So the larger the number of individuals who join a particular category or a particular charity, the lower is going to be your relative contribution in a sense that, you know, if there are many out there, then that causes a reduction on the benefit that you have from the prestige, right? But you have to have a sufficient number of individuals there in order to motivate this whole setup. So then it is that you get a club benefit, which is shared by everybody. So it's like going to a facility and then you get a particular benefit. But then at the same time, there is crowding. So then there should be some limit in terms of the number of individuals who participate. So that is the motivation to think in terms of a club. And then it is also excludable. So individuals who do not contribute to the particular type of, could be like a charity, could be an orchestra or you know, these individuals could be excluded from being mentioned, from being part of the club. So, but we also think that what may motivate these clubs to organize themselves could be that they also have some benefits in terms of distinguishing them from other types of clubs that are trying to attract the same type of say like customers or club members. So then the clubs themselves, they are also competing for prestige. So we got two motivations. One is the individual motivation to join in, but then the individual is also getting some motivation according to the club that the individual is. So this is very clear if we think in terms of universities. So you go to a particular university, you are a member or you are a professor in a particular university, then you are getting the prestige from being in that university. But then how well that university ranks relative to other universities, that also provides you with some additional benefit, right? So then the university itself gets that benefit. So then we consider these two types of benefits associated with prestige. And of course, that in the population, there are what we call anonymous contributors. So individuals who do not really care about prestige. In fact, there are a large number of examples of that the individuals contribute anonymously. So they don't want to get any prestige. They don't want to be recognized. So that there may be just because they care about the cause itself. So that they're what we call them are purists in the sense that they care about a particular public good. They don't care about getting a private benefit associated with their contribution. Okay, we can move on. So, then what we do in this paper is that we investigate the incentives for the formation of competitive prestige clubs and then examine their key behavioral features. So in our economy, we're trying to make that as simple as possible. There are two types of consumers. There are altruists, who are the purists that don't care about prestige, and there are also the prestige lovers. So so that's the whole setup, and then we're going to examine this, and then the prestige is measured in terms of relative contributions. And so relative contributions for the individuals and relative contributions across the different clubs. So, so that's so then that's I explained exactly this. So the institutional and then there's the individual component. So in the model, there are positive and negative external effects associated with expansion in one's contribution to the collective good. An individual's contribution to the collective good benefits every other individual in the economy because everyone derives positive utility from consumption of the collective good. But the contribution made by an individual or a club increases the individual or institutional average contribution level, and this results in a loss of prestige for each prestige lover. So the fact that you are contributing and then you're seeking to obtain prestige, since prestige is competitive, so then it's relative prestige, then that brings an external benefit to any other prestige lover, so that it is a reduction in their utility level. So the prestige clubs are formed in an attempt to promote prestige levels for their members by internalizing these externalities associated with expansions in contributions and by supplying prestige lovers with an institutional prestige component. So what are our results? So we can, since we don't have a lot of time, so then let's go to the nutshell. So first, we show that the prestige clubs emerge in the competitive equilibrium, that the internalization of externalities within clubs generate coordination benefits, and such benefits produce an increase in the overall provision level of the collective good, okay, relative to the level one would observe in an economy without prestige clubs. So the third one is that the optimal membership size is the level that maximizes a club's contribution to the collective good, okay, given the individual contribution made by each of its members. And fourth, the race for institutional aggrandizement is futile. Why? Because clubs are identical in equilibrium. So if the clubs were different in equilibrium, so if we had another margin of difference, so that you could have like clubs that are class A and clubs that are class B, according to the different types of demands for class A and class B, then you would also have this institutional component, because then you could generate, the difference between one and the other. So the relative ranking of the clubs would place the clubs that are prestige clubs or top clubs with an additional prestige relative to the bottom level clubs, right? But then since we are considering just like homogeneous types of clubs, then all clubs, they are identical in equilibrium. They have the same number of customers, the same number of members, and they contribute the same. So then the relative contribution is the same. So therefore, then there is no prestige component associated with the institution itself. And the competitive equilibrium is inefficient, so we consider this. Why? Well, because the clubs, even though they internalize the benefits for their members, they do not acknowledge the benefits. So they take as given the benefits or costs associated with other clubs. So therefore, then the allocation, the competitive equilibrium is inefficient. So how many clubs would there be in an economy that internalizes all sorts of benefits? Essentially, there will be just 0 or 1, depending on the distribution, whether or not it makes sense to have a club that would incorporate everybody. So that is the type of result that we come up with. So the related literature, so then this is related to two strands of the literature. There is a literature that looks at voluntary contributions to imperial public goods. So then there are several contributions there, starting with Corns and Sandler. So then André also contributed quite a bit to this. And then the other strand is the club literature. Also, it's a voluminous literature that has a lot of contributions, starting with Buchanan paper in 1965, and then Scotchman and Wooders, they contributed quite a bit to this literature. So the model, I'll go very quickly on the model. So there are two types of individuals: altruists that we call type A, and prestige lovers that we call type L. So then we say, well, there is two populations. So then it's a mass of consumers that there will be N consumers of each type, where N is large, okay? So there are 3 goods: a numerary good, a collective good, and prestige. So each type of consumer is endowed with W units of income, numerary good, which is positive. So then we make everybody identical. The only difference that one would have is that the population of altruists they care about the public good, collective good only, and the population of prestige lovers, they care about both the collective good and also about the private benefit associated with prestige. Okay. So then the utility for the altruists is simply like a well-defined quasi-concave utility function that depends on consumption of the private good, which is X, and then consumption of the collective good, the public good, which is Q. Okay. And then for the prestige lover, then we have the same type of utility function representing private consumption and then consumption of the collective good. But then we have also a benefit, which is we model that as a linear component. So it's a benefit where B is greater than 0, and then PL is the prestige that the individual L obtains and the individual I obtains in the population. Okay. So the collective good is non-excludable and is non-rivalrous. Okay, so the prestige level enjoyed by the prestige lover depends on whether he contributes to the collective good directly or channels contribution through an intermediary institution or prestige club. So we make this distinction because the prestige club then generates this institutional, potentially generates this institutional level of prestige, and then also the fact that, you know, having the contribution being made by a prestige club may provide an extra incentive to the individual, because then the individual gets a greater amount of contribution in the club itself that the individual might be sharing. Okay. So then we compare the two, and then in the model we start with a stylized model where first we assume that there is no clubs. So then in that particular type of model, then individuals, they derive prestige only because they are making their contributions. So then once they make their contributions, so then comparison to the contributions made by altruists. So then in that particular equilibrium, the altruists then they contribute nothing, okay, because the contributions of the prestige lovers would always exceed the contribution of the altruists. So then the contribution, the prestige then the prestige lovers obtain is relative to the fact that there will be some individuals in the population who contribute 0. So then relative to these individuals, then they get some prestige component associated with that. Okay, so then we consider a situation where there is a club, and then the club then would attract NJ individuals, NJ being larger than 1. And then there is a standard type of formulation for the club. So then there is a cost associated with running a club with NJ members. And we assume that there is crowding in this cost function. Okay, so then it's increasing at an increasing rate. So then it increases sufficiently fast so that one can think about clubs that would have limited size. And then the assumption that we use is just like the assumption in club theory, is that, you know, we can partition this economy, the cap N, which is the number of prestige lovers, could be then divided by little n star. That's going to be the optimal size for a particular club. And so n divided by n star is going to be, you know, essentially an integer, but then we consider that, you know, that's going to give us the total number of clubs, okay, and in this particular economy. Okay. So in economy with prestige clubs, the prestige level enjoyed by club member is a function of how large his contribution is relative to the average of individual contributions, okay, and let's see what comes as a second. And how large the contribution made by his club is relative to the average of institutional contributions. Okay, so that's the institutional component and the private component. Okay, so the two candidates for comparative equilibrium, then there's the centralized equilibrium without prestige clubs and the decentralized equilibrium with prestige clubs. So what we show is that the comparative equilibrium features identical prestige clubs. So prestige clubs emerge in equilibrium. and it is characterized by equations 10a to 10h. I'm not going to go over that because I don't have the time. Okay. So in the Pareto efficient allocation, there are two candidates: an allocation without prestige clubs, so then essentially the little n is equal to 1, okay, or an allocation with one prestige club where the n, little n, is actually equal to cap n, okay. So then in this case, then one looks at what would be the Samuelson condition. So the Samuelson condition in this case is a modified Samuelson condition that takes into account the pure component, which is the sum of the marginal rate of substitution, plus also the marginal rate of substitution for prestige. So then it's the marginal rate of substitution between prestige and then the utility, the benefit from prestige over the marginal utility for consumption of the private good. And then we equate that to 1 because the assumption is that it takes 1 unit of the private good to provide 1 unit of the public good. So, I have already described this. So the competitive equilibrium is inefficient, right? Because we show that there are a number of clubs which is larger than 1, but then so it's not between the two situations between no club and then 1 total club. So then we have the competitive equilibrium is inefficient, okay, and therefore it also yields an inefficient amount of the collective good, and it yields an inefficient amount of prestige level to each prestige level. Okay. So in conclusion, the incentives to promote the individual institutional components of prestige motivate managers to form prestige clubs. The race for advancement of both prestige components produces coordination benefits within clubs, but the race per se is futile because you have no institutional benefit associated with prestige. The coordination benefits stem from internalization of positive and negative prestige externalities within clubs. But then coordination benefits motivate managers to expand membership size, but the expansion are limited by growing crowding costs. Now, net of administrative costs, the prestige club industry produces a greater amount of a collective good than what one would observe in a hypothetical economy without prestige clubs. And the competitive equilibrium is inefficient because it features clubs of inefficient size, and each club does not fully internalize the positive and negative externalities associated with its members' contributions. And the competitive equilibrium produces inefficient amounts of prestige and collective goods. But relative to the situation where there is no prestige club, the formation of prestige clubs then yields a huge improvement. We have some examples. Huge improvement in terms of the amount of the collective good that is being produced. So then there is a motivation to the formation of prestige clubs. Even though it is inefficient, it is superior than the allocation without any prestige clubs. So that's the presentation. Thank you very much.
I have a question.
Thank you, Professor Emilson. Please, Professor André.
So there's a lot of relatively recent literature on a special type of externality called network externalities, right? Especially with social media. The value of being one of these networks increases with the number of users. So I was wondering, I think that it would apply here as well, right? You join one of these clubs and you're gonna build a network of people, right, that have a lot of prestige, and that's going to be beneficial to you. But of course, there's going to be a limit to this. So the question is, the externalities that you have already considered in the model, do they include network externalities? Or if they don't, or if they only include them partially, would it be possible to somehow add those types of externalities to your model?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So the network externalities, in fact, if we consider, say, just like within a particular club, the formation of the club in a given category, then within a club, then essentially we have a network, but then we don't have the network across clubs. So the network externality that you're talking about, I think, would be much broader. So it's like, you know, in a sense, then you could imagine that, but there are competing networks as well. So then in that sense, then if you join a particular, say, platform in which you are joining there because of there is somebody who you care about that you want to associate with. But then there is another platform that there is another person that you may want to associate yourself with and to get some of the prestige associated with that. Then that would be very similar to the situation that we have here in terms of clubs, right? So, but the association itself, if you want to associate with someone, then that would be a different type of question. So the different type of question that that would be really relevant for, say, campaigns in which you have, say, campaigns for contributions, in which one type of mechanism that is used is like, first in this campaign for contributions for a particular cause, what they first find somebody who is widely respected in the community, get this individual to contribute a large amount, and then that would attract other individuals to contribute, to associate with that particular individual, right? So I think that then in that case, then your prestige is that you are associating with that particular individual, not necessarily that it is the amount of contribution that you are making. It's just like you're getting prestige by association.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's a lot of analogies between your work and the work on digital platforms, a literature that I'm studying right now. And I haven't seen a model like this used in the literature. So I think there's a potential there for an integration of the two types of model. Thank you.
No, that's terrific. So let's talk about this. Maybe we can collaborate on this.
Yeah, just to write one more paper together.
Yeah, write another paper. So thank you, André.
Yeah, thank you.
Professor Emilson, yesterday we have the presentation by Professor Baranzini, who has a post-Keynesian life cycle model. And in his model, he states that the only class that is altruistic is the capitalist, because the workers cannot live inheritance because they don't save. So when I think about prestigious clubs and altruism, I think that like together things, not separate. Did you think about considering class in this model?
The class, what do you mean by considering class in this model?
Like heterogeneous agents, like capitalists and workers? Because when I think altruism and prestigious clubs, I thinking about capitalist class. I can't see like prestigious and altruism like different things.
Well, maybe if one can think about, say, capitalists in the sense that it could be, for example, if we think in terms of an industry where you can actually have the formation of different types of industries getting different types of firms getting together in a particular industry, so then they are associated, like, right? And so in Brazil you have that, like in São Paulo there is the association of industries in a particular sector. So then that would be similar to the sense that you know, the industrialists, and they are members of this particular type of club, and then the workers, they are excluded from this one, right? Now, if I am a capitalist and then I'm an entrepreneur and then I associate with other entrepreneurs, then if one worker could become an entrepreneur as well, so by maybe it does not have the original capital, but then it can be like very clever. It can borrow the money from an institution like a bank in order to initiate a particular type of venture. Then that that would be something that's quite interesting, because then if there is a benefit associated for associating with other types of capitalists, like or entrepreneurs, then you could get something that is similar in terms of prestige. It would not be prestige, would be, you know, some benefits from networking, for example, like André was talking about. So that might be like learning by doing. There might be some spillover effects that you can learn from others, you know, and therefore that you like to associate with them, share ideas, share concepts, and things like that, right? So that would be an interesting setting as well, in which you can motivate the formation of this club-like organizations, because they have some motivation for getting some benefits from sharing their ideas and sharing their experiences, right? So. Thank you very much for your question.
Thank you. I will moving for the next presentation.
Well,
anyone, we have more
yes.
questions?
I'm just gonna have to excuse myself, because the day is starting here for me, so then I have to get going, so I have to go to work. So,
sure.
Yeah,
so,
well, I apologize
Thanks.
as well, but I have to teach a class soon, so I will also have to leave. I'm sorry.
Okay,
So,
thank you, professors. It was a pleasure have you both here.
Yes, so it was really good to participate. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
it was
you.
excellent presentations. I hope you'll see you in Brasilia next time.
Yes, yes. Let's try to get together there.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Well, moving for the next presentation, the title is Hysteresis, Secular Stagnation, and New Consensus Three-Equation Model, a Post-Keynesian Structural Perspective. Now I will present my share and start the presentation. My screen. So my paper is intitulated Hysteresis, Secular Stagnation, and New Consensus Three-Equation Model, a Post-Keynesian Structuralist Perspective. Well, the aim of this article is to explain the three equations model from a post-Keynesian perspective, considering how structural change impacts on the ES, PC, and MER. So according to Summer, the issue of secular stagnations appears to be the definition macroeconomic challenge of our time. The secular stagnation is the low growth over an expand period. It may be impossible for an economy to achieve full employment, satisfactory growth, and financial stability through conventional monetary policy. Marx associates it with the decline in per capita productivity. One of the laws that explain productivity impacts on the economic growth was developed by Calder and Verdorn. The Calder-Verdorn law states that when the economic growth and production increase, labor productivity also tends to rise. So there are usually 2 points of view about this topic. First, that will create new professions and new fields of work, or two, that will lead to unemployment. So now current firms pursue production inheritance, implying structural change. Therefore, this article aims to understand the concept of hysteresis is a shift in the potential output, and secular stagnation by linking it to the Calder-Verdorn law in a post-Keynesian structural model of the three equations. So we approach a structural perspective where the behavior, function, and stylized facts are considered. The first equation is the ES curve, and we can see that the Calder-Verdorn can have a positive impact on growth. In this sense, fiscal policy should pursue the development of new sectors driven by R&D, incentive investments to promote structural change. Another possibility is increasing the employment rate through tax incentives or other instruments. We can obtain the natural rate of interest, the real interest rate consistent with the zero demand pressure. So these equations means that the natural rate of interest depends on employment, labor productive potential output, and the efficiency of monetary policy. So if potential output remains constant, labor production can push R into a negative territory and keep the economy in a permanent depression. That is secular stagnations. However, if such variable adjusts to demand, a hysteresis case, the natural rate of interest will first fall and later rise after a deep recession. So according to this equation, fiscal policy may alter R, aims for policy student credit to observe the marginal workers, universal income and minimum income to ensure dignity for individuals, among other policies must chase it. The second equation is the Philip curves. This equation captures distributive conflicts and the effects of the Calder-Verdor law, while maintaining the PC interpretations. Inflation can be adversely affected by market concentrations, great bargaining power, based on the competitive advantage of structural change. Hence, policymakers would provide protections for low and middle skill workers with the aim to reduce inequality, promoting growth and preventing social hardships. Moving forward, we find the natural rate of employment. She depends on the workers' bargaining power and labor productive growth. These models aligns with the post-Keynesian theory of inflation, where inflation is derived by a real distributive conflict rater. Other main results emerge. The evolutions of the long-term unemployment rates is completely synchronous with the evolution of structural change. Higher levels of the Nairu resulting for an increase in the long-term unemployment would boost inflation risk. Just a minute, I think someone is entering the meeting. Now, finally, our monetary rules illustrate the labor market impacts. One possible rationale for this could be the student loans provide to secure employment for low-skilled workers, reducing their marginalizations. Furthermore, structural change and productivity will gradually manifest in prices, potentially moving workers to continue seek employment. So our approach shows that deep recessions can cause a change in potential output. That is the meaning of hysteresis. Thus, the supply side policies interactions with fiscal policy aim to reduce labor market rigidity and stimulate demands would be successful in combating these problems. So if hysteresis is at work, the greater the central bank induce recessions, the more long-term unemployment will be, and the more significant the increase in the Nairu. Now we move to the graphic representations. The first graph is the ES-PCMR model. So the interest rate must adjust downwards to accommodate the investments. Since investments and the interest rates have an inverse relationship, our ES curve has a negative slope. Besides, the PC curves show how an increase in demand raises inflation. Thus, we have a positive relationship, while the MR displays the trade-off between income and inflation in the central bank objective functions. So we can represent our model in the figure 1. The next figure shows the case when we have secular stagnations. So when firms adopting structural change as IA, the critical aspects of the PC will be impacted. And since this could result in unemployment, despite the increase in productivity, the demand for goods and services will be under pressure or remain constant. This means that the economy will be in a permanent depression, That is the meaning of secular stagnations. So the increase in the unemployment will be inflationary when the economy is already at the potential output level. If supplies remain the same, prices could be expected to decline, denting inflation prospects. Consequently, demand expansions would appear unable to reduce long-term unemployment, and only supply-side policies aimed at reducing labor market rigid would be successful. So we have this in the case of secular stagnations. The only successful will be a supply-side policy. However, if potential outputs adjust demand, the hysteresis cases, the natural rate of hysteresis will first fall and later rise after a deep recession. So hysteresis is generally meant to imply that by increasing the actual unemployment rate significantly, a deep recession may be also cause a change in the equilibrium unemployment rate and consequently in potential output. Thus, cyclical falls in economic activity may leave persistent effects on macroeconomic outcomes. In turn, this implies that attempt to reduce long-term unemployment by means of expansionary policy, even if successful, would require paying a price in terms of higher or accelerated inflation rates. In this case, the monetary policy is not efficient since it reduces and accelerates inflations. A possible solution to these problems requires structural reforms in the labor markets. So demand-side expansionary policies would be able to decrease both total and long-term unemployment without generating accelerated inflations. So if we have a hysteresis cases, fiscal policy will be able to resolve the problem. So we conclude that are different from another approach. The model developed here show the impacts of structural change on unemployment and on fiscal and monetary policy. We develop a model considering supply and demand side to analyze the impact of structural change. So our finds turn the spots on the policy implications of secular stagnation. On one hand, if we deal with secular stagnations, supply policy aimed at reducing labor market rigid would be successful to solve such a problem. On the other hand, demand policy would be able to resolve hysteresis. The possible of equilibrium characterized by slow growth is demonstrated, and because of this, the post-Keynesian interpretations of the three equations models makes demand as crucial as supply to explain secular stagnation and hysteresis and the alternative ways to get off it. Therefore, it is important that the government, together with the monetary authority, develop a political agenda to ensure work security and to prevent a hysteresis or a secular stagnations case. So I like to thank you very much. It's a prestigious present in this event and honor the Professor Joanilio. So thank you. And here we have my email for we can continue our talk after the questions and answers. So if we don't have any questions, I will move to the next presentations by Professor João Gabriel de Araujo, whose the title is Stability and Hopf-Bifurcations of a Growth Model Considering Autonomous Consumptions and Employment Effects. João, now you have the word. I don't know if Professor João is hearing us because he is in another meeting, so I will try call him.
Hello.
Oh,
I'm
hi,
here.
hi, you can hear me.
Sorry,
So,
I was finishing my presentation, Professor George Thompson.
okay.
I
You can share your screen and start your presentation when you
yes,
are ready.
I'm opening my presentation here. Uh, can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you for this opportunity. It's a pleasure to be here, and I will try to make my best with this presentation in honor to Professor Joanilio Teixeira. My paper was wrote with Beatriz Estulano Vieira and Professor Maurilio Boaventura, which is a professor at NESP. Our paper is so I think sorry, I will change my presentation. Uh, can you see my presentation now or stop to
Yes, we can
share?
see.
Okay. Uh, I have some reflections about this kind of model. First, the focus here is on particular heterodox macroeconomics model, the Higgs-Isafem's multiplier. This type of model is really hard to work, considering the labor market. We don't have an alternative model that incorporates this kind of market. So, me, Beatriz, and Maurilio proposed a new model introducing the unemployment and employment fact effects. So, as such, our paper proposes a model for approach incorporating unemployment effects. It demonstrates the stability of the model and the existence of bifurcation, which demonstrates a dynamics and also a cycle in the model. We also present another simulations of the model using infinity different time domains and the methods. Our results demonstrate that the employment is better income productive impulse to substitute original autonomous consumption. This kind of model originals work with autonomous consumption, and the autonomous consumption will driving the economy to a better place. But for us, employment will be a better variable to consider here and impulse our economy. Uh, our dynamic system is modeled these three equations. The first equations demonstrate how the employment and the unemployment behavior. So, if delta dot is higher, we have a higher level of G plus GW, which is the growth rate of employment and the growth rate of average wage. If the dot is lower, is close to zero, we will have a bigger uh, autonomous consumption. The second variable is the second dynamic variable u dot is the behavior of the capacity utilization. Well, this means that if you have capital, you will have to have labor to interact with the capital. If it is close to 1, we have all the capital working. If it is close to 0, we have non-working progress. Age naught is the investment share dynamic function. We have for this case three propositions. The first proposition, the stability of the economy depends on the growth rate of employment and wage rate of the autonomous consumption. In this case, you have an equalization between the three variables, and this is not possible because if you have this case, we will have a matrix with a column composed only by zeros, and the stability will not be provided. We will have a stable path in this case. So we ignored this situation. Proposition 2, we have a different to the proposition 1. We will have the growth rate of the autonomous consumption bigger than the growth rate of employment plus the growth rate of the average wage. In this case, we will have a stable a stable path, and this stable path will be will be great to the economy. We will have a convergence to the normal capacity utilization, and the third, but we will be harming the employment. The third proposition demonstrates the opposite of such a perspective. We will have a bigger employment and average wage, bigger than the growth rate of autonomous consumption. And in this case, we will have a properly proposition, a properly effect. We will grow in the effective demand and also the productivity divide uh, a more efficient model. So what's happened? The numerical simulation for us using finite time domain for proposition 2 will demonstrate that we will harming the employment here, but our capacity utilization will be increasing, which is because how our capacity utilization is increasing, because we don't have any labor to work with this capital. How this is increasing? It is strange. Mathematically is possible, but it is strange. The second one is that we have the employment raising to close to full employment of labor, and our capacity utilization is also increasing. We also have an over accumulation of capital here, which is interesting and possible because we have all the labor working into the capital, and our investment share will be really, really smaller than the investment share in the first situation. The next result is that our income, which is provided by the the productivity function or the effective demand, is increasing, but in the proposition 2, it is increasing slowly in comparison to the second case, the proposition 3. Proposition 3 is the income is increasing fast, really, really faster. We have a really better result in this case, and the wages are increasing too, but also the profit share in levels above levels bigger than comparison to the proposition 2. In this sense, we conclude that we contribute to the literature in 4 aspects. The first one is the determination of our data, presenting the economy's employment level, and from this equation, we developed our workers and wage growth rate in the first ordinary differential equation for our 3-dimensional system. The second contribution is to formulate the dynamic system incorporating employment wages and autonomous expenditure growth rate, the capacity utilization differential equation impacting the investment share in variation in time. Proposition 3 shows the growth rate of employment and wages are bigger than the growth rate of autonomous consumption, raising the work's employment hours level. The final conclusion is to show that the model has a bifurcation in position 2 and 3. But it is important to note that is the first model to incorporate the labor market explicitly into this kind of. Beatriz, Maurilio, and I wrote this paper in 2020, and we are improving since then to guarantee that is properly developed. Thank you very much, Beatriz. I'm open to questions and comments.
Now we have some time to discuss the presentation, but as I am your co-author, I think it's not fair. I have questions, so I will pass to Professor Geraldo if he has some questions you can ask.
Como é que você vê a aplicabilidade do modelo para a economia brasileira?
Okay. So the desk with Professor Geraldo was how we see this kind of model to the Brazilian economy. Professor, we in our simulation we provided a comparison between uneven or undeveloped economies and developed economies. Our results demonstrate that if an uneven economy incorporate this kind of model into their policy decisions, into their political assumptions, they will provide a better situation. They will be able to create a developed economy, to hit a developed economy. Our comparison was between Brazil, Chile, and Switzerland. We compared these three countries, and the results are really great because if you don't assume that labor is important in your economy will be harmed. Simple, simple like that. Your economy will be harmed if you don't have the incorporation of the labor into the market. If you simply ignore the labor market, you will harm your economy. So in economies like Brazilian economy, Chile, Argentina, and the other countries, we have to formalize this labor to create a possibility to formalize this labor and not just simply ignore them or simply pushing them to the informal economy, because informal economy also will harm this kind of approach. We only have to consider formal labor, so it is important to any undeveloped economy to consider formalize their labor into the labor market.
Thank you. Congratulations of the author of the excellent article. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Beatriz?
Thank you, Professor. Now we move for your last presentations, Economic Dynamic Cycle of the COVID Effects, Unemployment Perspective, from Professor João, Geraldo Góes and Professor João Gabriel Araujo de Oliveira. We are seeing your screen, so you can start now.
Okay, thank you. I will start the presentation, and then Professor Geraldo will make some comments about the paper. As the last presentation, I made a smaller one because I only want to demonstrate the results and our conclusions about this important and interesting paper. Our paper named the Economic Dynamic Cycle of the COVID-19 Effects, Unemployment Perspective. It is important that we are focused now on an heterodox macroeconomic model, but based on the neo-Kalekian model. The neo-Kalekian approach, which was wrote by Dutt in 1984. As such, our paper proposes a new model of or approach incorporating the Sears approach. The Sears approach is an epidemiological model developed in the 20s, the 1927, and it is an important model to demonstrate how the epidemics behaves in all countries. So we have a susceptible, infectious, and recovered peoples. The series approach is epidemiological dynamic model. Our model reformulates such a perspective. We're designing the model as an economic framework where the infected people are removed from their working activities and the recovered ones are restored to these economic activities. So now we have to decide. We have a susceptible people, but how to determine which one will be the susceptible one? Because as we saw in the COVID-19 pandemic, all the people were susceptible to this kind of health, this kind of health disease, this kind of disease, kind of virus. And how will be how much people will be affected, will be infected by such a virus, and how much will be recovered by this disease. In this situation, we formulated this approach, incorporate this perspective to unemployment. So, if you are infected, you will not be able to work. You will be far from the working labor market. If you are recovered, you will be restored to the labor market. You will work again. Our results demonstrates that the series approach affected the dynamic of the neo-Kalekian income determination, and without any government assistance, the economy tends to be crushed. Because if you don't have any government assistance, how to deal with this kind of situation? We will have a big problem here. We will have to free the markets, and we will see how it is done. So we'll be dying a lots of. So our dynamic system is also divided in three equations. The first one demonstrates that this is not the investment check. This is the profit share, and our profit share is dynamics, as is demonstrated by Dutch. The second equation is the capacitization equation, which demonstrates the dynamic behavior of the capacitization. The third equation demonstrates how the unemployment behaves, how we have the unemployment created by external causes or pandemics like this, and how we will have a model being determined by the natural unemployment, like Phillips curve or any other solution. So the proposition, we also have three propositions. The first one is not efficient. Like the last paper, the first one is not efficient because we have both growth rate of natural unemployment equal to the growth rate of external unemployment caused by external causes. In this case, we will have a column formally by zeros, and we cannot prove that the stable path exists in this case because we don't have any solution or we will have infinity solutions. In this case, the stability is not proved, and this case is not dangerous. Proposition 2 demonstrates that when the natural unemployment rate is the economy is driven by the natural unemployment rate. So we will have a situation like a normal times. like a region of Phillips curve. No. But the third case is the counterpoint. We will have that the economy is driven by the growth rate of unemployment created by external causes. And this case is really, really, really concerning. Because if we have this case, we are driven by the pandemic, and our economy will be harmed by this. However, the results shows that third case will cause a chaotic situation, and without governmental assistance, probably the capacity utilization will be crushed by the pandemic size because we will have a lot of people dying. Uh, Let me take this opportunity to say that this model also demonstrates a cycle because we proved the bifurcation, and this cycle is created by following this kind of growth rate of unemployment, and this kind of growth rate of unemployment are not fixed in the model, and is demonstrating a lot of different results. Our conclusion we have this paper developed a model based on Dutch principles and introducing a characteristic of SIR to guarantee an approach which is capable to explain the economic dynamic cycle in pandemic situations, which is really a recent preoccupation of all economists. Represented the stability condition to its case, and the Hopf-Bifurcation of its case was proved and does exist. We have a cycle, our model demonstrates a cycle. After such analysis, we present the interval of each dynamic proposed in the series construction intervals in which the economy is influenced by epidemiological variants and as well as by economic variables. I did not provide in the presentation uh, this lack of intervals because the equations are really big, really, really big. So thank you very much. Here you have my name. I'm assistant professor of economics at the Brazilian Institute of Capital Marketing. This is my email, and also Professor Geraldo Sandoval Góes, the planning research technician at the Institute of Applied Economic Research, and his email is this. So I will pass the floor to Professor Geraldo to make his final comment, and then can make questions. Professor Geraldo?
Thank you, João. Eu vou falar em português, né, e o João vai traduzir. Esse artigo, na verdade, ele é uma prova, né, da capacidade do professor Joanilio em fomentar a pesquisa econômica, em despertar vocações, né, em ligar gerações, inclusive, de pessoas. Né? Esse artigo, na verdade, eu escrevi no outro contexto, né, junto com o Luan Borelli, que é um jovem pesquisador, que era exatamente transcrevendo para o Brasil o artigo do Eisenhower, que é o primeiro modelo CIR macro, que foi realmente um modelo seminal que permitiu essa abordagem mais macroeconômica da questão da epidemia de Covid-19. E assim que eu publiquei esse artigo, eu entrei em contato eu tive a ideia de publicar,
Eu acho que o professor Geraldo travou. O Geraldo? Travou. Eu acho que ele travou se ele não caiu.
Yeah.
Vou mandar uma mensagem para ele.
Maybe he will come back and I can accept here.
Mandar uma mensagem para ele. Tá um calor do inferno aqui. Tá um calorzão.
Tá gravando.
Não tem culpa.
Aí, voltou.
Voltou? Professor Geraldo Góes said that this is an important paper, and the contributions of Professor Joanilio Teixeira is to provide us with hard comments and suggestions and link different types of approach. He based this paper on a previous one, which was wrote with Lucas, which is an young assistant research, and he stopped to talk. I will wait his comment.
Yeah, he's back now.
Estou voltando. Você traduziu a primeira fala, João? Sim, né? Então, exatamente, eu tive essa ideia, e percebi da possibilidade de aplicar o modelo CIR no arcabouço pós-keynesiano. E eu, então, entrei em contato com o professor Joanilio Teixeira, que exatamente me indicou o João Gabriel, que eu não conhecia, que era orientando dele. E dessa atuação do professor Joanilio surgiu esse paper que agora estamos apresentando. O professor Joanilio tem representado no Brasil uma pessoa que muito importante para o estudo, para a continuidade da pesquisa do pós-keynesiana, do arcabouço pós-keynesiano brasileiro. É um prazer e uma honra estar apresentando aqui, fazendo essa homenagem ao professor Joanilio. Graças, obrigado.
Professor Geraldo Góes said that he designed this idea to incorporate the CIS model to a Kalecon approach, and then he contacted Professor Joanilio, which made his contact with me, João Gabriel, to incorporate this idea and design this article. Professor Joanilio is a brilliant professor that can incorporate and interact different perspectives, and he was the founders of the post-Keynesian tradition in Brazil.
Graças. Obrigado. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. Beatriz,
now we have some minutes for questions, so I will start. Is this a short-term model? Because we still don't know the long-term effect of COVID. For example, workers restore to the job market, but who develop health problems can retire faster. And if this is a short-term model, how do you justify the stability? A minha pergunta foi se esse é um modelo de curto prazo, porque a gente ainda não sabe os efeitos de longo prazo da Covid. A gente pode ter trabalhadores que vão voltar para o mercado de trabalho, mas desenvolveram problemas por causa do Covid e talvez vão ter que aposentar mais rápido, e isso pode acabar impactando o modelo. E se esse é um modelo de curto prazo, como vocês vão justificar a estabilidade? Porque a gente só tem estabilidade no longo prazo.
I have 2 or 3 comments into this. This model incorporates the SEARS approach, and the SEARS approach is not only for the COVID-19 pandemic situation. We already had another pandemics in Brazil and abroad, like the Espanhola flu in the beginning of the last century. So we can also approach this kind of model to this kind of situation. We have already had a pandemic situation to provide a simulation or to provide empirical evidences. But yes, this is a model which incorporates Dutch vision, and the Dutch vision is in the short, medium, and long run. We also can provide stability, but only not global stability in the long run. We can provide partial stability in the short and medium one. So in this case, we have a long run path. We have also a long run stability, but we also don't have a global stability, so we can provide short and perspectives. And we are not focusing only on the COVID-19 in this case. We can approach this model to other pandemic situations, like H1N1 in 2009, or Spanish flu in the beginning of the last century. Okay?
A incorporação, né, a incorporação do modelo C no arcabouço pós-keynesiano, né, no modelo do Dutch, na verdade permite uma coisa interessante, é que o horizonte de tempo que nós estamos interessados é o horizonte de tempo em que o número de mortes, o número de pessoas, se estabiliza, por exemplo, o número de pessoas que são falecidas, o número de pessoas que são contagiadas, e não somente na preocupação de longo prazo da economia, e sim na estabilização, né, dessas variáveis epidemiológicas.
Our concern here is not about the total of the effects of the pandemic, but how much the infected and the deaf people will affect the course of the economy, and this course of the economy will be affected by this kind of new approach, like SIR, or is the susceptible infectious covered model.
Any more comments, or we can
It's not
finish this
fair
section?
to make a being one of I will not do that.
So I think we can finish this section. I would like to thank you everyone to be present, and I like to thank you for the presentations. It's an honor to be here. Professor Joanilio impacts our research and our life, so it's a pleasure being here, honor such great, brilliant research. So I will finish the sections and thank you all.